He was not supposed to be home that day. The trip was planned for another 4 days, and everyone knew his schedule very well. For years, the millionaire had lived a life controlled by calendars, meetings, and flights. His return times were always exact, never changing without notice. That was why no one expected him to step out of his car that quiet afternoon and walk toward his own mansion. The reason he came home early was simple but serious. A business deal overseas had fallen apart suddenly. There was no point in staying, and for the first time in a long while, he felt tired of hotels and long conversations. He wanted rest. He wanted his home. Without informing anyone, not even his personal assistant, he boarded the earliest flight and returned. As the car stopped in front of the gate, he noticed something strange right away. The front lights of the house were off, even though it was already getting dark. Usually, the house staff kept everything perfectly lit. He ignored the feeling at first and stepped out, adjusting his coat, telling himself he was only overthinking. The gates opened slowly, and the sound echoed through the empty driveway. Normally, someone would be waiting, a guard or a staff member, ready to greet him. This time, no one came. The silence felt heavier than usual, but he continued walking, pulling his suitcase behind him. When he reached the main door, he paused. The door was unlocked. That alone was unusual. Security rules were strict, and nothing was ever left open without reason. He placed his hand on the handle and hesitated for a moment, feeling an unexplained tension in his chest. Still, he went inside. The house smelled the same, clean and familiar, but something felt off. There were no voices, no footsteps, no soft background music that usually played in the evenings. The large living room lights were dim, and one curtain was half open, as if someone had rushed and forgotten to close it properly. He walked further in, his footsteps echoing on the marble floor. As a man who owned many properties around the world, he knew his homes well. This one had always been calm and orderly. That calm now felt disturbed, like the air itself was holding a secret. He placed his suitcase near the stairs and glanced around. A cushion on the sofa was slightly out of place. A glass sat on the table, half full, as if someone had been drinking and left suddenly. These were small things, but together they made him uncomfortable. He checked his watch. The staff should have been active at this hour. Dinner preparations usually started early, and the house never felt empty. He considered calling out, but something stopped him. A strange instinct told him to stay quiet. As he walked slowly down the hallway, he noticed faint sounds. Not voices exactly, more like movement. A door closing softly somewhere deeper in the house. His heart beat faster. He reminded himself that it was his own home, and there was nothing to fear. Still, the feeling did not go away. His mind raced through possibilities. Maybe the ray was an emergency. Maybe someone was sick. Or maybe he was simply tired from travel. He told himself not to jump to conclusions. Just as he reached the corner near the kitchen, he saw a shadow move quickly across the wall. He stopped immediately. The house was not empty. Someone was there. Before he could speak or take another step, a familiar figure appeared in front of him. It was the maid, the one who had worked for him for many years. She looked different. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with fear. She did not greet him. She did not smile. Instead, she rushed forward, placed a finger gently on her lips, and leaned close. In a barely audible voice, she whispered, "Stay quiet." In that moment, he realized his early return had changed everything. Whatever was happening inside his home was not meant for him to see. And without knowing it yet, he had just stepped into a situation that would turn his life upside down. The maid stood very close to him, so close that he could hear her breathing. Her hand was shaking as she kept her finger on her lips. The look in her eyes was not normal fear, it was panic mixed with worry, the kind that comes from knowing something bad could happen at any second. He wanted to ask what was wrong, but before he could say a word, she gently held his arm and shook her head. "Please," she whispered again, even softer this time, "do not make any sound." He nodded slowly, confused but alert. This woman had worked in his house for almost 8 years. She was always calm, respectful, and confident. He had never seen her like this. Whatever had scared her so badly had to be serious. She glanced over her shoulder toward the inner rooms of the house, then back at him. Her eyes filled with tears she was trying hard to control. Without speaking, she motioned for him to follow her. Every step she took was careful, slow, as if the walls themselves were listening. They moved down a narrow hallway near the kitchen. The lights were dim, and the silence felt dangerous. He noticed his own heartbeat was loud in his ears. His mind was full of questions, but he trusted her instinct more than his curiosity. They stopped near a small storage room. The maid opened the door just enough for them to slip inside. It was dark and smelled of cleaning supplies. She closed the door quietly and leaned against it, as if holding something back. Only then did she speak. "You were not supposed to come back today," she said, her voice trembling. "I know," he replied softly, "that is why I am asking, what is happening in my house?" She took a deep breath, as if gathering courage. "There are people inside," she said, "people who should not be here." His eyes narrowed. "Who?" She shook her head quickly. "I cannot say yet. Not here." From the other side of the door, faint sounds could be heard. Footsteps. Low voices. Someone laughing quietly. The sound made his stomach turn. This was not imagination. This was real. The maid wiped her eyes and continued, "When you left for your trip, everything was normal. But 2 days ago, things changed. I tried to stop it. I really did." Her words confused him even more. "Stop what?" She hesitated, then whispered, "The house is being used without your knowledge." That sentence hit him hard. This was his home, his private space, protected by rules and security. The idea that someone was using it behind his back made him feel angry and powerless at the same time. "Why didn't you call me?" he asked, trying to stay calm. Her head dropped. "I was afraid. I was warned not to." His anger slowly turned into concern. He realized she was not just scared for herself, she was scared for him too. She explained that on the second night after he left, unfamiliar cars arrived late. She thought they were guests approved by someone higher in the house. She had questioned it but was told firmly to stay quiet and do her job. Later, she heard arguments, saw strangers moving freely, and noticed rooms being locked that were always open before. "I wanted to leave," she said, her voice breaking, "but I could not. I needed this job. And I was scared something worse would happen if I spoke." He understood the fear in her words. Power did not always protect people the way it should. Sometimes it made others dangerous. A sudden loud sound echoed from the hallway. Something heavy was dropped. Both of them froze. The maid's hand tightened around his arm. "They cannot know you are here," she whispered urgently. "If they see you now, everything will explode." He looked at her, trying to understand the full meaning of her warning. "Who else knows I came back?" "No one," she replied. "I saw your car on the camera and ran to stop you." That realization shocked him. If she had not reached him in time, he would have walked straight into whatever was happening. She opened the door slightly and checked the hallway. It was empty for now. She looked back at him and said, "You trust me, yes?" He nodded without hesitation. "Then stay close," she said, "because once you see the truth, nothing will be the same." With that, she stepped out, leading him deeper into a secret that had been growing inside his own home, waiting for the moment he returned early. The deeper they moved into the house, the stranger everything felt. The millionaire had walked these halls thousands of times, yet now each step felt unfamiliar, as if the house no longer belonged to him. The maid walked ahead, careful and alert, stopping often to listen. She moved like someone who had learned to be quiet out of fear, not habit. They passed a guest room that was supposed to stay locked when he was away. The door was slightly open. Inside, the lights were on. A suitcase lay open on the bed, filled with clothes that were not his. He felt a sharp wave of anger but forced himself to stay silent. The maid glanced at him, silently asking him to control his reaction. Further down the hall, he noticed more signs that disturbed him. Shoes he had never seen before near the wall. A jacket thrown carelessly over a chair. Empty cups and plates on a table that should have been clean. His house, once perfectly organized, now looked like a place being shared by people who did not care. They stopped near the stairs leading to the upper floor. From above, low voices drifted down. Someone was talking confidently, laughing, as if they owned the place. The sound made his chest tighten. It was not just strangers being present. It was the comfort they had inside his home that frightened him most. The maid leaned closer and whispered, "They stay mostly upstairs." "How many?" he whispered back. "More than you would expect," she replied quietly. That answer worried him. This was not a simple misunderstanding. Something organized was happening. Something planned. She guided him toward a small sitting room that was rarely used. From there, they could see part of the staircase without being noticed. They stood in the shadows, listening. A man's voice grew louder, talking about money, plans, and timing. The words were unclear, but the tone was confident, almost proud. The millionaire felt a mix of emotions he was not used to. Fear, anger, disbelief. He had built his life on control and awareness. Yet here, inside his own home, he knew nothing. He looked at the maid and whispered, "How long has this been going on?" 3 days, she said. "Maybe more." "Who allowed this?" he asked. She hesitated. Her silence was louder than any answer. He realized then that the truth might be closer to him than he wanted to admit. The idea made his stomach twist. Suddenly, footsteps echoed from above. Someone was coming down the stairs. The maid's eyes widened. She quickly pulled him back behind a tall cabinet just as a man appeared at the bottom of the staircase. He was well-dressed, confident, and completely relaxed. He picked up a glass from the table, drank from it, and checked his phone. The millionaire watched closely. He did not recognize the man, but something about his behavior felt wrong. This was not the way a guest behaved. This was how someone acted when they felt secure. The man walked away, heading toward the kitchen. Once the sound of his footsteps disappeared, the maid exhaled slowly. "That is one of them," she whispered. "He comes and goes freely." "Does security know?" the millionaire asked. She shook her head. Some guards were told to take time off. Others were replaced temporarily. That sentence hit him harder than anything else. This was not just someone using his house. This was someone controlling it. His thoughts raced. He began to understand how deep the situation was. Whoever was behind this had power, planning, and access. They knew his routines. They knew when he would be gone. They believed he would not return early. The maid looked at him with guilt in her eyes. "I wanted to warn you before," she said softly. "But I did not know how." Phones were checked. Cameras were watched. He studied her face. She looked exhausted, like someone who had not slept properly in days. He realized she had been living in constant fear inside these walls. From another room, a door slammed shut. Voices rose again, louder now. The house no longer felt quiet. It felt occupied. The millionaire understood one thing clearly in that moment. This was no longer just about discovering a secret. It was about surviving it. As he stood there, hidden in his own home, he realized the house was full of secrets, and he was standing at the edge of a truth that would change everything he believed about trust, loyalty, and control. They waited in silence for what felt like a long time. The voices upstairs moved from one room to another, sometimes laughing, sometimes arguing in low tones. The millionaire stood still, his mind racing, trying to understand how things had reached this point without his knowledge. Every sound made his muscles tense. This was not how a man should feel inside his own home. The maid slowly guided him toward the back corridor, an area rarely used by guests. From there, a narrow opening allowed a clear view into the large study room upstairs. The door was half open. Light spilled out into the hallway. The maid stopped and gestured for him to look. Inside the study, several people were gathered around his desk. His desk. Papers were spread across it, documents he recognized, business files, property plans, and folders that should have been locked away. A man stood confidently at the center, pointing at documents as if he were in charge. Others listened closely. The millionaire felt his breath catch. This was no casual gathering. This was planning. He recognized some of the papers immediately. They were related to his investments, his assets, things that only a few trusted people should have known about. Seeing them exposed like this felt like a deep betrayal. One of the men laughed and said, "Everything is moving faster than expected." Another replied, "Good. As long as he stays abroad, we are safe." That sentence struck him like a blow. They were talking about him. The maid gripped his arm, sensing his reaction. Her eyes were filled with fear and regret. She leaned close and whispered, "Now you understand." He nodded slowly, unable to speak. The truth was unfolding right in front of him, and it was worse than he had imagined. Suddenly, the door opened wider. A woman entered the room. She was dressed elegantly, confident, and completely at ease. The millionaire froze. He knew her. He knew her very well. His heart dropped. She walked toward the desk, picked up one of the documents, and spoke with authority. "We cannot delay anymore. If he finds out, everything will collapse." Her voice was calm, controlled, and familiar. Too familiar. The realization hit him painfully. This was not just an outside betrayal. It was personal. His chest felt tight as memories rushed through his mind. Trust. Shared dinners. Private conversations. Promises. All of it now felt like a lie. The maid lowered her head, unable to look at him. "I tried to warn you," she whispered. "But I did not know how." Inside the room, the conversation continued. They talked about transferring assets, changing signatures, and finalizing arrangements. The words sounded cold, calculated, and dangerous. These were not desperate people. These were people who believed they had already won. The millionaire's anger burned quietly. He wanted to storm into the room and confront them. He wanted answers. But he knew that acting too soon could destroy any chance of understanding the full truth. Then something even more shocking happened. One of the men turned on a laptop and displayed security footage. The footage showed the front gate, the driveway, and different angles of the house. The video paused on an image of his car arriving earlier that day. The room went silent. "Wait," the man said slowly. "This is from today." The woman stepped closer to the screen. Her expression changed slightly. "That is not possible," she said. "He is still overseas." The maid's hand tightened around his arm. Her breathing became fast. The man zoomed in on the screen. The image was clear. "It is his car," he said. "But where is he now?" Panic spread across their faces. Voices rose. Questions were fired back and forth. Their calm control was breaking. The millionaire realized how close he had come to walking directly into their plan. If the maid had not stopped him, he would have been seen immediately. "This changes everything," the woman said sharply. "Find him." In that moment, the danger became real. The maid pulled him back gently. "We must leave this area now," she whispered urgently. "If they start searching, they will find us." As they moved away, his mind struggled to accept what he had seen. The shocking discovery was complete. The betrayal was clear. His home had become a place of secrets, lies, and hidden plans. And now, the people who believed they controlled everything had realized he was back. The game had begun, and there was no turning back. They hid in a quiet corner of the house, far from the study, where the noise of hurried footsteps and raised voices could still be heard faintly. The maid closed the door carefully and leaned against it, her shoulders shaking. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence between them was heavy, filled with everything that had just been revealed. "I never wanted you to find out like this," the maid said at last, her voice low and broken. The millionaire looked at her closely. In all the years she had worked for him, she had always been invisible in the way servants are often expected to be. Efficient, polite, silent. Now he realized how much she had been carrying alone. "Tell me everything," he said calmly. "From the beginning." She took a deep breath, as if preparing to open a door she had kept locked for too long. She explained that the first sign came the night after he left. A car arrived late, one she did not recognize. She assumed it was a guest approved by someone close to him. But then more cars came. And the night after that, even more. At first, she tried to follow the rules. She cleaned, served, and stayed quiet. But soon she noticed things that did not feel right. Private rooms were being used. His study was opened. Documents were moved. Security cameras changed angles without explanation. "I asked questions," she said softly. "I was told not to worry. I was warned." Her hands trembled as she spoke. She explained how one of the men had spoken to her privately, his voice calm but threatening. He told her that if she said anything, she would lose her job. Worse, he hinted that accidents happen to people who interfere. The millionaire listened carefully. His anger was no longer sharp. It was cold and controlled. He understood fear. He understood power being used to silence. "I stayed because I had no choice," she continued. "I needed the money. And I thought maybe it would stop. I thought maybe you would come back before it went too far." She looked at him, guilt filling her eyes. "Every day I wanted to call you. But they watched the phones. They checked messages. I was trapped inside your house, knowing it was no longer safe." She then revealed something that shocked him even more. She had been quietly observing, memorizing faces, routines, and conversations. She knew who came and went, which rooms they used, and when the house was most empty. "I stayed silent," she said, "but I did not stay blind." The millionaire realized then that her silence was not weakness. It was survival. She told him how she had moved certain documents out of sight, hiding them before they could be taken. How she had delayed cleaning certain rooms to slow their plans. How she had adjusted small things in the house, creating confusion without being noticed. "They think I am afraid," she said quietly. "And I am. But I am also loyal." Her words struck him deeply. Loyalty had been betrayed by those he trusted most, yet preserved by the person he had barely noticed. He placed a hand on the table, steadying himself. "Why didn't you leave?" he asked. She shook her head. "If I left, no one would be watching. No one would protect what little was left." Outside the room, footsteps rushed past. Voices argued. The house felt restless, like a storm building inside it. "They know you are here," she said. "They will search every room." He nodded. "Then we must be smarter than them." For the first time, she looked at him with something other than fear. Hope. He realized the truth in that moment. This was not just his burden anymore. They were in this together. The maid had carried the weight of his house in silence. Now it was time for him to carry her fear and turn it into action. As the sounds grew closer, he understood one thing clearly. The maid's burden was no longer hidden. And the quiet strength she had shown might be the key to surviving what was coming next. The moment finally came when hiding was no longer possible. The voices grew closer, the footsteps heavier, and the search more desperate. The millionaire knew that silence would soon be broken. What he did next would decide everything. He stepped out first. His presence cut through the chaos like a sharp blade. The people in the hallway froze when they saw him standing there, calm and unshaken. Shock spread across their faces. No one expected him to appear so suddenly, especially not with such control. "What is going on here?" he asked, his voice steady but firm. The reaction was immediate. Confusion turned into fear, fear into forced confidence. Some looked away. Others tried to speak but failed. A few stepped back instinctively, as if his authority had returned the moment he revealed himself. The woman who had been leading the plan pushed forward. Her expression shifted quickly, masking panic with a practiced smile. "You are back earlier than expected," she said. "This is all a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding," he replied calmly. "In my house. With my documents. And strangers moving freely." Silence followed. No one dared to answer. He walked slowly into the center of the room, his eyes moving from one face to another. He recognized greed, guilt, and fear. The truth no longer needed words. It was written clearly on their faces. "You had a plan," he continued. "And it depended on my absence." One man tried to defend himself, speaking quickly about business arrangements and temporary decisions. The millionaire raised his hand, stopping him instantly. "I built everything you see," he said quietly. "And I know exactly when something does not belong." The tension was unbearable. Every second felt stretched. Then he turned to the woman. "You," he said, his voice colder now. "Explain." She hesitated, then spoke with careful words. She tried to shift blame, to say others had pushed her, that it was only meant to protect assets. Her excuses fell apart as she spoke. The millionaire listened without interrupting. When she finished, he nodded slowly. "You thought silence meant permission," he said. "You were wrong." At that moment, the maid stepped forward. Everyone turned to look at her, surprised. She had always been invisible to them. Now she stood tall, her fear replaced by quiet strength. "I saw everything," she said clearly. "And I heard everything." The room erupted. Voices rose in anger and disbelief. Someone accused her of lying. Someone else threatened her. The millionaire raised his voice for the first time. "Enough." The single word brought silence. "She is under my protection," he said. "And every word she speaks matters." He then revealed that he had already contacted his legal team and security from his phone earlier, silently, while hiding. Cameras were being restored. Access codes were being changed. What they believed was under their control was slipping away fast. Panic spread. People began to realize the situation had reversed. "This ends now," he said. "Leave my house." Some tried to argue. Others realized resistance was useless. One by one, they backed away. The woman looked at him, anger and regret mixed in her eyes. "You will regret this," she said. He met her gaze without emotion. "No," he replied. "I will remember it." As they left, the house slowly became quiet again. The silence felt different now. Cleaner. Lighter. The maid stood beside him, unsure of what would come next. He turned to her and said, "You did the right thing." Tears filled her eyes, but this time they were not from fear. The confrontation was over, but the consequences were only beginning. Trust had been broken, and rebuilding would take time. As he looked around his home, the millionaire understood something important. True power was not in control or wealth. It was in facing the truth, no matter how painful, and choosing courage over silence. After the confrontation, the house felt strangely empty. Not just quiet, but hollow, like something important had been removed from the walls along with the people who left. The millionaire stood alone in the living room for a long time, staring at the space where trust once lived. The victory did not feel powerful. It felt heavy. By the next morning, the consequences began to show themselves. Lawyers arrived early. Security teams replaced every guard, every code, every camera. Phones rang constantly. Messages came in from people who suddenly wanted to explain, apologize, or distance themselves. The millionaire listened, but his heart was no longer open the way it once was. The truth had changed him. The woman who led the betrayal was removed from his life completely. Accounts were frozen. Documents were reviewed line by line. Every connection was questioned. It was shocking to see how deep the silence had allowed things to grow. What hurt most was not the money or the plans. It was the realization that people he trusted had believed he would never notice. The maid watched everything quietly from a distance. She returned to her duties, but nothing felt normal anymore. She moved carefully, unsure of her place. She had spoken the truth, but truth always leaves scars. One evening, the millionaire called her into the sitting room. She entered nervously, her hands folded in front of her. "You are not in trouble," he said gently, seeing the fear in her eyes. She nodded but did not speak. "You carried the weight of this house when I was blind to it," he continued. "That has consequences too. For me." She looked up, surprised. "I trusted the wrong silence," he said. "And I ignored the right one." The days that followed were difficult. News spread quietly among social circles. People whispered. Some admired how he handled the situation. Others judged him. He learned quickly who stayed and who disappeared. Wealth had always attracted people. Loss revealed who they truly were. At night, sleep did not come easily. His mind replayed moments from the past, conversations that now felt false, smiles that hid intentions. He questioned himself more than anyone else. How had he missed it? How had his own house become a place of danger? The answer was painful but clear. He had been absent, not just physically, but emotionally. He had believed systems were stronger than people. He was wrong. The maid noticed the change in him. He was quieter now. More thoughtful. Less commanding, more observant. He walked through his home like someone seeing it for the first time. One afternoon, he stood by the window and watched the staff work outside. "Silence," he said slowly, "can protect, but it can also destroy." The maid understood what he meant. The consequences did not end with legal actions or broken relationships. They reached deeper, into the way he lived his life. He reduced travel. He began to involve himself personally in things he once delegated. He listened more. He watched more. Trust, once broken, did not return easily. For the maid, life also changed. Other staff treated her differently now. Some with respect. Some with distance. She had crossed an invisible line. She was no longer just a maid. She was someone who knew the truth. One evening, as the sun set over the estate, she stood in the garden and wondered if silence had cost her peace forever. The millionaire joined her quietly. "You are safe here," he said. "And valued." She looked at him and nodded, still unsure. The consequences of silence had been severe. Lives were altered. Bonds were broken. But from that damage, something honest began to grow. Not comfort. Not certainty. But awareness. And that awareness would guide everything that came next. Time passed, but the house never returned to what it once was. It became quieter, not with fear, but with thought. Every room carried a memory, every corner held a lesson. The millionaire walked through his home slowly now, not as an owner, but as someone who had survived a storm inside his own walls. The events of that early return stayed with him. He no longer measured life by profit or control. He measured it by awareness. Wealth had once made him feel protected. Now he understood that protection came from presence, not power. He began to change his routine. Trips were shorter. Meetings were fewer. He spent more time at home, not watching, but observing. Listening. He noticed small things he had ignored before. The expressions of the staff. The tone of conversations. Silence now spoke louder than noise ever had. The maid continued her work, but her role had quietly shifted. She was no longer invisible. He spoke to her directly, asked her opinion, trusted her instincts. Not because she had saved him, but because she had shown courage when silence was easier. One evening, he invited her to sit in the garden. The sun was setting, painting the sky with soft colors. "This house taught me something," he said thoughtfully. "It showed me the cost of not paying attention." She listened quietly. "I thought leadership meant distance," he continued. "I was wrong. Distance creates shadows. And in shadows, secrets grow." The maid nodded. She had lived in those shadows. Slowly, life settled into a new rhythm. The betrayal faded into memory, but the lesson remained sharp. He restructured his business with transparency. He reduced layers of authority. He trusted fewer people, but trusted them fully. People noticed the change. Some respected it. Others felt uncomfortable. He no longer tolerated silence used as a weapon. He asked questions. He expected honesty. And when it did not come, he acted without hesitation. One morning, he stood in the same hallway where he had first been warned to stay quiet. The memory felt distant now, but meaningful. That whisper had changed everything. He realized that the maid's warning was not just about silence. It was about timing. About awareness. About knowing when to listen and when to speak. For her, life slowly found peace. Fear no longer followed her through the halls. She slept better. She smiled more. She knew she had done the right thing, even if it had changed her life forever. Before she left one evening, he said something that stayed with her. "Sometimes," he said, "the smallest voice carries the strongest truth." Years later, when people spoke about the millionaire, they did not talk about the money he made. They talked about the man he became. More human. More present. Less blinded by power. And the house, once a place of secrets, became a place of honesty. The early return that once felt like an accident turned out to be a turning point. A moment that exposed lies, tested courage, and reshaped a life. The reason the maid whispered, "Stay quiet," was stunning not because of danger alone, but because that silence revealed the truth. And that truth changed everything.